This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, when I see my screen.
I can. Yeah, it says, all right, did you select your key? Because I'm doubting that you have selected your key. Let's connect again. So copy your IP on Quick Connect. And I think also I think maybe you're using in caps. EC2 user was in caps. So yeah, we'll see that. Let's connect again. Okay, enter. Yeah, so you will have to remove this entry first. Okay, do one thing. Click on session on the top left. You have a session. Yeah, click there. And then it should bring up a new window. Okay, you can put your remote host details here. iPhone user. No, make it small. Don't make it in caps. Make it in small. Yeah, that's all. And then go on the advanced SSH case. And then use your private. I think it would be just the username which you were using in caps. Let's see. Yes, it's authenticating now.
Oh,
So
it was in
yeah,
cap.
the username. Yes, so you were giving EC2 in caps, and in Linux or Unix, your username is case sensitive. So just remember that it should be in a small case.
Oh, okay.
All right. So okay, so I'll take back the control, and then let's go. All right. So let me see my screen. What is visible? Okay. So can you see the slide on my screen?
No, not yet.
I think it's taking time to reflect. So let's see. Let me share it again.
Yeah, I can see now.
Okay, I just selected me. All right, so it's visible now. I can see that. Okay, so let's get started. So, uh, point of discussion again would be all the storage services. I'll mute you for now because I'm getting a background noise.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, when you need something, you can just raise your hand or put it in the chat window, and then I'll take it from there. All right, so let's start with simple storage service. So we have discussed these services briefly. We saw some of the benefits, what are the features available as a part of it. And now today we'll be going a little extended onto these topics. So we'll be discussing all the rest of the storage. And from the theoretical aspect of it, we will complete it today. And then we'll go into demo. Right, so this is something which we have discussed, which is your simple storage service, and it is called S3. Now, S3, as we have seen, it provides you unlimited storage space, and it works on pay-as-you-go model. So the amount of storage you will use, you'll be paying only that much. So that's efficient. So you won't be getting charged. If you buy a hard drive, you have to pay for the whole hard drive. But in case of S3, you would be using it based on what you are putting inside the bucket. So as soon as volume increases, you'll be getting charged higher. So it's object level storage is what we have seen yesterday, and there are resources like buckets and object, which when you create it, they are private by default. So they are not accessible to anyone outside by default. All right, so bucket is a container. So you have something called buckets, which is a container where you store your objects. Bucket is owned by AWS account that creates it. And it also helps identify account responsible for storage and data charges. So that means if you are creating your account, your bucket owner will be you. So mainly the AWS account which creates it, and you will be responsible for paying the charge. If there are any charges coming for that S3, you will be responsible for that. Now, S3 bucket has a globally unique name. This is one of the good features in bucket. So if you want to create a bucket and you specify a name which is being already taken by someone, you cannot create a bucket with same name. So you have to provide a unique name, and it may be across any regions, regardless of whatever region you're creating, it has to be unique. Now it is a global service. S3 is actually a global service, but when you create it, you specify which region it will be part of. And every object in a bucket, you can have, you can put any object in the bucket, and there's no limit on number of objects that a bucket can have. Okay, so that was about bucket. Now let's get into objects. So object is something that we place inside your bucket. It can be your any of the files, your videos, your libraries, your xtext files, XML files, CSVs, whatever. So anything you can just place inside your buckets, and they are called objects. So objects are fundamental entities which are stored in S3. It is uniquely identified with a bucket by a key. So there is a key and a version ID for the object when it is placed inside a bucket. Now it also contains some of the data and metadata such as value. So there will be a value for that particular object. There will be a metadata which will contain details about content type, the size, the date it was placed in, or the modified date, like those. And then there will be a key which is more like an object name that systems assigns it. And also there will be a version ID. Why version ID is important? Whenever you will place an item into a bucket, and if you want to again place another object of the same type, same name, it will store it as version 2. So that's something it does automatically. So it will have a version ID. And then it will have server resources and access control information, which tells it who can access it, or who are the users, how many users can access it, which will be defined as a part of your bucket. Okay, so what are the features of it? So how you work with S3? So it's internet accessible storage via HTTP or HTTPS. So you can access it from your web browser. It's highly scalable, fully managed. It is virtually unlimited storage capacity, so you can store about anything, any amount of data. 1 byte to 5 TB in size per object. So maximum you can place one object is of 5 TB. And trillions of unique customer objects is what you can place, and millions of transactions per second it can handle, and it provides you 99 point, you can say up to 9 times 9% durability. So that's the amount of like maybe 0.0000 up to 9 times 1 file is what you can miss in a year. So it's highly durable, so you're not going to miss your data. It was introduced first in 2006. You can use it for your audio, video, images, backups, etc. And it provides you unlimited bucket size. Now, so price depends upon storage use and transfer out. So whenever price is calculated for S3, it depends upon what you're storing. So the size you are putting into your bucket, and whenever you request for, so mainly when you request to fetch the data, that's called transfer out. So it will be charging you based on request as well. But you get, even for free tier, you get more like 30,000 requests. So that's more than enough. And it is not a file system, and it provides you 99.99% SLA. So these are the features. And it can also be used as HTTPS endpoint. So once you store an object, you can copy that object as a link, and we will see that, and then you can access it from anywhere in the web if required. You can also perform auditing, which provides you access logs. You can use it with REST or SOAP interfaces, and it also provides server-side encryptions as well as client-side encryption, which is possible. That's something we saw yesterday.
Can I ask you a question?
So how? Yeah, go on.
Yeah, on the previous slide, what is REST? REST.
Okay, so REST API is more like a URL. So you have SOAP and REST URL. So it's like a URL you call RESTful service. So what it does, so you hit a link. It's more like you hit a link. For example, let's say when you click, right click, and you get, source. Now, using REST URL, you can fetch information from this. So you would be able to fetch the information. So you'll use a URL like this, or you can pass user ID and password. You can hit that URL and you can fetch details even from the database. So REST is a kind of service which endpoints through which you can connect your applications, or you can make requests to applications. So similar to SOAP, which is another UI using which more works with integrated with Java. REST is another URL. It's more like a URL which uses HTTP or HTTPS protocol to fetch the data. So it uses get, post, all these features of your web page, and then using that it can fetch the data, or it can submit the data, or it can append the data. So that's what you can use REST for. And people are using it as a part of the development procedure to, and this is really new, so it has come, and it's really efficient actually. So yeah, mainly it's kind of a URL in which you specify all the details, and depending upon what you want to do it with it, you want to create, you want to delete, you want to update, so you can use get, post, put, all these methods. You can use that, and you can work with either web pages or database or any of the other tools. So REST works almost with everything these days.
Oh, okay.
All right, so that's the next one. So let's see what's the difference between your traditional and your Amazon S3. So in Amazon S3, it's quite simple. So you pay only for what you use. So the amount you will specify, you will be paying only for that. But if someone is buying a full storage, let's say someone bought it from EMC Square, or for one of the vendor who provides you storage. Now, what you actually do, so you buy something for 1 PB raw storage, one of the organizations, so they'll be buying it. And then when they buy it, what they actually get is 800 TB usable storage. So even though, I mean, you can also see that if you go and buy an external hard drive, right, it happens the same way. So whenever you buy, you always get a little less than that. So you bought something for 1 PB, which you paid for, but finally you got 800 TB, which you will be using, which is available for you to use. But out of that, you have allocated 600 TB for storage. So you decided that 600 is what you'll be utilizing. But when you created a 600 TB storage, your application is actually using 400 TB of data, right? So that's the scenario. Now, actually you bought 1 PB, but what you're using is this 400 TB. So in the word process, you are actually wasting, or if not wasting, you are keeping it idle. So 600 TB is kept idle. It is not utilized for any purposes, right? So that doesn't happen in case of S3. In case of S3, when you want to use 400 TB, you will be paying exactly for 400 TB, and then it's efficient and highly durable as well, with no other issues. All right, so how does bucket and objects work within S3? So it's fully managed. You store everything in buckets. It provides you versioning. It provides you access control list and bucket policy. So you can decide who can access it. And you can also design policies which decides what resources the bucket can access. It uses AECS 256-bit encryption. So AECS is nothing but it's an algorithm which is being designed. So you have few algorithms such as AES, TSC, DES, RSA. So these are all different algorithms which mainly decides how encryption and decryption is performed within your uh, infrastructure, or in this case, object name. By default, it is private whenever you create it, and you can access it over the internet if it is public. And it is ideal for storing your images, videos, application data, backup, and more. Now, S3 can also become your web server. That's another feature. So you can use S3 as a static content website, which we saw yesterday. And you can offload static content to S3 and run dynamic content on EC2. So that's a good way to do it. So if you have some static contents, you can enable it to be featured from S3, while if you have some dynamic content, you can run it from EC2. So you are making use of good use of resources, and you're not running everything on EC2. Right, so when do we use S3? So what are the different ways, or when do you actually should go about using it? So whenever you are working with web scale storage capacity and performance for web application, if you have such thing in mind, you should use it. When you're worried about your high data durability, when you want to store your log files, when you want to store a backup and active archives, you can use that. If you are required single origin store with delivery to content delivery networks such as CloudFront. So you want to make use of CloudFront, mainly content delivery network, which we'll see during networking, then S3 is helpful. And ingestion for big data application. If you're running your big data application with AWS, S3 becomes a point for ingesting your data, and then it can be transferred to your big data application. So these are some of the scenarios where you can use it. Now, as from the organization point of view, what all different scenarios where it can be used. So you can use it for storage and backup, application file hosting, media hosting, storage delivery, and storing AMI and snapshots as well, which we also saw earlier. Okay, so how does it work? So you have Amazon S3, you create buckets, you put objects inside it. So these are, you can see rectangle, circle, triangle, these are your objects, and you can create number of buckets. So you can have up to 100 buckets in each account. So each account can have up to 100 buckets. Now, within this data, you have buckets, and within that you have objects. Now, objects consist of metadata, values, and other things which we just saw. And you can also control access to your bucket as well as you can control access to your objects. So you can specify separately as well. Okay, so 1 second, let me go back. Right, and this is whenever object key. So there is something called object key. When a bucket is created, there will be an object key defined for that. Okay, so it also is secure. So your Amazon S3 is secure. It provides you control access to your bucket and objects. So how does it provide that? So there are 3 ways you can define that. One is access control list, which defines who are the users or which accounts within AWS can access it. So you define users based on that, or the roles. Mainly, you can decide what accounts can access it. Followed by bucket policies. Within bucket policies, you define what resource it can have access to. So you can deny or approve or deny at this level. So you can define policies for that. And then there is something called identity and access management, IAM policies, which is nothing but that's where you create your user groups and roles. So you can also restrict it using those roles. So these are 3 levels where you can define the security and you can control your access for Amazon S3. Now it's quite simple if you want to upload or download via SSL. So you can use encrypted endpoints, and you can also use encrypted endpoints or data using AWS SDK, which is nothing but AWS command line tool. All right. Now, so it also provides you versioning feature. What does versioning means? So let's say by accidentally, if you write, so you placed one of the file and you accidentally placed it one more time. So what it does, it gives you a version. So even if the new file comes with updates, it will be creating a new one. So such case, it doesn't actually removes it completely until you want. So it generates a new version with every upload. So whenever you upload it, it will be generating a new version. And it also allows you to retrieve the deleted object, or you can roll back to previous version as well. So if you wish to do that, in case both files are same, maybe you can roll back to previous versions, or maybe if the new file which came, it has some issues, you can still roll back to previous versions. So these are the 3 stages within Amazon S3 bucket. It can have unversion. That means first time when you place it, there is no version enabled, it's default. And then versioning enabled and versioning suspended. So you can make use of these 3 when you want to work with versioning. Okay. Now let's just look at object lifecycle. So lifecycle decide how your objects behave within your bucket. So you have buckets, and then objects are placed in bucket. Now how do you define in lifecycle? So you can have the lifecycle defined for log files, archive documents, digital media archives. So these are some of the examples. Now how do you do that? So you can decide that whether you want it to be part of your S3, because S3 is being charged. And if you want to move it to Glacier, that's something you can do when you define it in life cycle. So you can say that after 30 days or 6 months or 1 year, move these objects to Glacier so that you can save some money on S3. So mainly in terms of design. So you can design that way. So you can define a life cycle, and you can decide when these objects expire from your S3 and what is the life of that object will be within S3. Now let's say in terms of pricing. So as we know, S3 in terms of pricing, it is pay only for what we use, and there is no minimum fee. So you don't pay for anything until you place something. So when you place it, if you're not in free tier, you will be getting charged for it. But when you're in free tier, you won't be getting charged for it at all. Now your price based on location of your Amazon S3 bucket. So where you're placing it. So what does that mean? That means the region where your S3 bucket is created. So your price will differ based on that. Now, estimated monthly bill using AWS simple monthly calculator. So that's one of the great calculator where you can find out, or where you can actually devise a solution on how much you will be charged if you are using S3 for certain period of time. So it's a good calculator. It's not only for your S3, but it's for a couple of other things. You can check it for EC2 instance, says, and quite number of other resources to check it on monthly basis how much you would be charged based on your usage. So you can calculate it from that. Okay, so pricing is available based on storage pricing, request pricing, and data transfer pricing. Data transfer out of Amazon. So when you place it, when you request for something, fetching it, and when you move data from it, so mainly you fetch data from S3, you will be charged. So these are the three parameters which defines pricing. Okay, now this one is important. In terms of classes, normally what we use is Amazon S3 standard, but there are three storage classes which you can make use of. So first is Amazon S3 standard, then you have Amazon standard infrequent access, and then Glacier. So Glacier is given another one, but you can also have another one which is called reduced redundancy, which we discussed yesterday. So in terms of durability, you can see that it's all same. In terms of availability, it's all same. There is no difference, except for if you use S3 standard, there is a retrieval fee. Okay, and also you use it when you want infrequent access to data. So you don't want active access. If you want active access, your S3 is always the best. Similarly, Glacier is something which you use when you don't want real-time access to data. And before accessing data, once you have placed it in Glacier, you need to retrieve it, and then you can fetch it from there. Now, it says restoring data. One second, let me close it. It says restoring object can take up to 3 to 5 hours. Yes, it does take it, but there are new additions these days, and now you can also retrieve data within 3 to 5 minutes for an additional cost. Okay, so this is what we have in terms of S3 bucket. You have standard storage, reduced redundancy storage, which is called RRS, and granular storage type selection. So you can see the durability for reduced storage is 99.9, and that's definitely high. Now, again, in terms of pricing, you can see that the first 1 TB in case of standard storage is 0.0300, right, per GB. While in case of reduced redundancy, for 1 TB, it's going to cost you 0.0240. So your pricing differs quite a bit. Give me 1 second. Let me just plug in my charger. Okay, we are good. Right, so these are some of the use cases for few of the companies who have implemented their solution on S3. So Yelp is one of the company who have done it, who is using S3 for daily logs and images. And it generates more than 1.2 terabytes of logs per day, and it is using S3 for that purposes. It also runs more than 250, approximately 250 Hadoop jobs per day, processing more than 30 terabytes of data, and all those data comes in from S3. So yeah, Yelp is using it. So that was one of the use cases for S3. Next is archival storage, and that's where we'll be discussing about Glacier. So S3 is a scenario where you use it when you want active access to data. Next is your Amazon Glacier. Now this is low-term, low-cost archiving service. So mainly you want to use it more like a backup. So let's say there is a hospital and they have their 50 years of data, so up to 50 years of data. Now, whenever you go to hospital, maybe you are a new customer and you may be going frequently, even though it may be 6 months or 1 year. So hospital understand that user don't often come once their treatment is done within 1 year, or even if they want to come, they will be coming within 1 year's time. So they would like to keep 1 year's of data within S3, but anything beyond that, it makes sense to put that data back to Glacier, tools like Glacier, so that it can be kept there secure, and whenever they want it, they can always fetch it, right? So in such scenarios, they can put the older data into a Glacier, which is much cheaper than your S3. So it's low-term, low-cost archiving service, optimal for infrequently accessed data. That means you don't want real-time access to data and you can wait for such data, those data you should place in Glacier. It also provides you 99 point up to 9 times percent durability, and then retrieval time is 3 to 5 hours. But like I said, there are recent additions, and if you're ready to pay higher cost, you can also retrieve the data within 3 to 5 minutes now. Now 3 to 5 hours was long back story, like a month back story. Before a month or two, it was 3 to 5 hours, but now that has been changed. Okay, now again, see the pricing. So you are being asked to pay 0.01 per GB per month. That's really cheap. That's cheap pricing. And you can make use of it if you really want to work with Glaciers, and it is an efficient tool. Quite number of clients, what they do, so they are running their system on premises, but in terms of data, especially the logs data or something which they won't be using very frequently, they will push it onto AWS Glacier, and it's a big deal for them. Now if you are using TBs of data, it's just going to cost you $120 per TB per year, and that's again a big saving if you consider it from the organization point of view. For a business, 120 per TB per year is nothing. Right, so how do you define between storage cost and retrieval cost? Okay, now Amazon S3 and Amazon Glacier integration. So this is also where you define the life cycle. So you have something called policy-based archiving service, and you define that within the life cycle. So you have lifecycle policies, and S3 lifecycle policies allow to delete or move object based on age. What do you mean by age? So when your object is placed, so let's say this is your S3, and you place your objects here. So you have short-term buckets, short-term, mid-term data store, or mid-term bucket. So mainly you have data placed here, let's say today. Now you may want to move this data after 30 days or 60 days or after 1 year. So depending upon what you decide, you want to move data from S3 to Glacier. So I gave you an example of hospital. So let's say they don't want any data after 6 months. So anything older than 6 months, they can place it in Glacier. And whenever they want it, they can always fetch it back. So what they'll do, so they'll place all these patients records, those files inside S3, and they will create a lifecycle policies telling it that once it is older than 6 months, and that's where it defines age. So either it can delete it. So if you wish, you can delete it, or you can move objects. So if you want to delete, it will just get deleted from here. If you want to move, it moves from S3 to Glacier based on what we define in lifecycle policies. So we can set rules per S3 bucket. So for each of the bucket, we can set those rules. So we can say, for example, move object to Glacier after 30 days, or delete object after 365 days. So we can design such rules which will be implemented. Okay, so that's within lifecycle policies. And SoundHound is one customer who has used S3 and Glacier for that purposes. Now, it's one of the world leading social sound platform. It uses audio files transcoding in multiple formats. So that's what it does, and it stores 2.5 petabytes of data, and it serves transcoded files from S3, while original file it moves to Glacier because they are not required to access original files. Whenever they want it, they can always take it back from there. So SoundCloud is making use of active S3 and Glacier for its purposes. All right, so that was about S3 and Glacier. Now we'll move into block storage, which we have actually covered during EC2 as a part of EC2 as well. It is also called EBS, which is Elastic Block Store. Now, Elastic Block Store, it's called persistent block level storage volume, offers consistent and low latency performance. So it's faster in terms of input output, and you can store data automatically, which gets replicated to its availability zone. So that's one of the biggest boon working with EBS, that your data can be replicated. And you can also store snapshot in S3 if required to, which we have seen. So we created a snapshot from AWS, from volume, and then if required, we can save it to S3, but we deleted it because that costs you a little. Now this is the life cycle of EBS. So what happens, you have an unused space available which you create. So once it is being created, for example, you can create between 1 GB to 16 GB is what you can create. Once it is created, you will attach it. So attaching it to one of the EC2 instances, which we did when we created a volume and attached it to one of the EC2 instance. So once it is attached, it will be showing you in use. So until it is attached, it will be showing you available. As soon as it is attached, it will be showing you in use, and then it will be mounted within your EC2 instance. Once it is mounted, you can also create a snapshot. You can also create independently. You can also create a snapshot and keep it safe somewhere and then detach it. And later on, you can use this snapshot to create volume again. And then when you want to delete it, you can also delete your in EBS. So that's your life cycle for EBS. Okay, and your EBS can be of number of types. So you can have SSD backed volumes or SSD backed volumes. Now, what is the difference? Whenever you go for SSD, that means you need a faster performance. So you need more IOPS, more input output per second. That's performance. So you need frequent input out read write or a small IO size. For transactional cases, you will use SSD, which is more in terms of performance, and so it should be fast. While SSD is then when you are more interested in throughput. Instead of performance, you are more interested in throughput, where it sends more megabytes of data per second. So you can use it for large streaming workloads. So you have these two choices, SSD and SSD, which you can choose. Now, when you create an EBS, you have a choice to choose one of these. So you can choose between general purpose, provision IOPS, throughput optimize HDD and cold HDD, and these are the difference. So based on what you choose, your size will differ. So for example, for this one, you can choose between 500 GB to 16 terabytes. For throughput HDD, it can be 500 GB to 16 terabytes. For provision IUPS, it can be minimum 4, maximum this, and this will be minimum 1, and maximum 16. So depending upon what you want to do, you can use it. If you are worried about performance, you'll be using the first two. If you are more interested in terms of throughput or cost, you would be going for this ones, because you'll be getting more space, more storage for less price. All right, so EBS is recommended when data must be quickly accessible and requires long-term persistence. So you want to work with applications, you want to work with databases. We did HTTP server installations. When you want such things, you have to use EBS, which is mounted to your EC2 instances. When you launch EBS as encrypted volume, anything which is being placed inside it, everything will be encrypted. And you can also take point-in-time snapshots from EBS volume, which you can store in your S3 and later use it to create volumes as well. Now, what are the use cases? So you use EBS for OS operating systems. You use it for database installation. You use it for enterprise applications, such as what we did for HTTP server. You can use it for web server, application server, all those kind of things. And then build business continuity. If you want to go for loss and recovery time, you can do that using EBS snapshots. And then applications, when you want to install anything. So you can use EBS for these purposes. Okay, now how does pricing works for EBS? So pricing first is based on region, and then you can also calculate it online. It differs based on two regions, so the amount of storage you're using and the performance. So IOPS is little costlier than megabytes per second. So yeah, IOPS, because it provides a better performance in terms of input output, it will be little higher. Okay. Now, how does EBS work? So you have EBS volume 1, EBS volume 2. So this is on availability zone A and availability zone B. So they are available in a single availability zones. And this is what we have seen. So if you create EBS volume in availability zone A, you cannot attach it to EC2 instance, which is running on availability zone B. So that's something you should remember. Okay, these are some of the differences. So that will be available to you. So I'll not take much of your time. It's just that EBS is really fast. So this is the difference between your Amazon EBS and S3. We know that this is block storage with file system, while S3 is object store and it can be accessed through web interface. It is not a file system. EBS is really fast, while S3 is fast. It is fast because it is attached to your EC2 instances. Now it is across multiple servers in an availability zones, while your S3 is across multiple regions. EBS encryption, it provides encryption for data volumes and snapshot, and for S3 it has encryption at all level. Access from the internet for EBS no, for S3 yes, and this is a disk drive while S3 is online storage. So these are some of the differences which we have. Okay, Now, apart from that, EC2 also has something called instance storage. Now, instance storage is a storage within instance. Now, it's more like a firmware which you have most of the time when you in your laptop, desktop. So similar to that, these virtual machines also have something called instance storage where it can have SSD or magnetic, but there is no persistence. That means any data which is being stored, that will be removed as soon as you start or stop that, and it automatically deletes data when your EC2 instance stops, fails, or is terminated. So yeah, there is something called instance storage as well, which is attached to your EC2 by default. Now, what is the difference? When you store something in EBS, it is persistent. That means even if you stop and bring it up again, your data will still be there. When in case of EC2 instance storage, it's ephemeral, so it's short-lived. So as soon as your instance is down, your whatever you have kept there, it is being lost. So it's more like temporary cache memory kind of thing. Okay, and so I'll just take it from there. It is just about what happens during reboot, stop, start, and terminate. And this is about your EC2. So mainly what are the different actions happens when you reboot or when you stop, start, and terminate. So during reboot, your instance store is preserved, while when you stop or start, it is being erased. Okay, now EIP is something we have seen. So EIP will be associated, while in case of terminate only, it will get dissociated. That's because terminate, your EC2 instance itself will go. So these are some of the differences. All right, so this is about a bit about your EC2 instance storage. Now EC2, you can see that within your EC2, you have some storage available which can store some of your data, more like temporary data. So it's free storage with EC2 instance. You're not getting charged, and that's something required for EC2 function. And there is no SLA for this because it's not provided separately. And its size depends upon your EC2 instance type. So if EC2 instance type is bigger, its size will be bigger, otherwise it will be smaller. And then you have some speed in terms of read per second and write per second. And you have replicated data for load balanced web servers. If you're using load balancer, it has replicated data as well coming in from there. So it's volatile and there is no persistence, and all data is automatically deleted when an EC2 instance stops, fails, or is terminated. Yeah, so that's what you have for your EC2 instance in storage. While your block storage, which is not inside EC2, but it is something outside which you can attach. So it is high performance, it's persistent. You can create something 1 GB to 6 TB in size, which is massive. So we have up to 16 TB as well. You can mount it on EC2 instances. You do not need to attach. You can attach and detach to your EC2 instances. You can choose between SSD and magnetic. It provides you two performance, boostable and provision throughput. And it also leverages S3 for snapshot storage. So if you created a snapshot, you can store in S3. And it supports incremental snapshot as well. You can also transfer this between availability zones. That is one of the great features. So if you created it in one of the availability zones, you can change that. But you cannot access it from internet as well. Okay, and you can attach multiple EBS volumes to your EC2 instances. But remember that one volume you cannot attach to multiple EC2 instances. So what does that mean? So you can have 3 EBS which you can attach to a single EC2 instance, but one EBS you cannot attach to 2 EC2 instances at the same time. So you have to detach it from here and then attach it to the second one. So that's something you should remember. This I have already covered. Let me go back. Okay, so this just tells you that you can attach and detach. So let's say, for example, it was attached to one of the EC2 instances which died for some reason. You can detach it from here and you can attach it to the new one. So no need to create a new volume for that. Okay, and you can also create a snapshot and you can store that snapshot in your S3. Now, what are the different types? We have magnetic, we have general purpose, we have proficient, and we have seen the differences between them. Let's see only in terms of IOPS. So magnetic one comes between 40 to 200 IOPS, while your general purpose comes with 3 IOPS per GB, and your EBS, which is proficient IOPS, so mainly it is being designed for that purpose, you get up to 400 IOPS consistently. So that's why They even charge a bit higher when you go for provision IOPS. General IOPS, it's more like a balanced approach where you get burstable performance of 3000 IOPS as well. So that's in terms of the speed. And IOPS is your input output per second for up to 256 KB blocks. All right, and this is our last one, which we saw in our kitty. And let me log in as well so that we see where it is. So we have discussed about Glacier, we have discussed about S3, we did discuss about EBS and then gateway solution. We have one more actually, but that's something we'll cover in practicals. So gateway solution, how it works is that's always you use when you walk to work between your on-premises and between AWS. So you want to work with on-premises machines, your data center, and you want to connect it to AWS. So one of the client, on-premises client, they want to run their servers here, but just the logs, they want to place it in S3. If they have such a requirement, they can use gateway solution for that purposes. Now, how do they do it? So it's connect an on-premises software appliance. So that's an appliance is being provided to them to provide integration with Amazon S3. So using this appliance, they can connect to S3 over a secure connection. Now, there are three ways to do it. You have gateway cached volumes, gateway stored volumes, and gateway virtual tape library. And we'll see that what the difference between them. So this is how it works. So this is AWS on your right, and this is customer on premises. Now, what has been done? There is a AWS Storage Gateway VM is being created on the customer side. They have their servers, it's working. They have their on-premises source. So over the SSL, whatever data is being coming, which is attached to one of their own storage, that is going to Amazon S3 using Amazon Storage Gateway service. Gateway storage service connects between your Amazon S3 and between your corporate data center. So you can use it two ways. It is called cached and stored. So cached means data is stored in Amazon S3 with frequently accessed files kept locally. While stored means asynchronous point in time backup snapshot to S3. So in second case, when it is stored, snapshots are kept here, while in the first case, actual data is being stored here. And that's the difference between your cached and stored. There is one another way which is different than what we have. So you can have something called VTL, which is virtual tape library, which you can set up on customer side. You can have media change in tab drive, and still connection is still same. So what happens? You can write to tape here, which can then go to S3, or you can also make it go to Glacier as well. So you can make use of S3, or you can archive it to Glacier as well. So you can go both ways. All right. And that's how it works. So you can use it for backup data into Amazon S3. We can also use this for disaster recovery of applications to EC2. So if you want to do that, or archiving in Amazon Glacier. So these are the three purposes you can design, solutions you can design using AWS Storage Gateway. Now, so disaster recovery is what we have given, one of the scenarios. So let's say this is your Route 53, which we'll be covering later. For now, just understand that one of the websites which is running and your control is coming from there. So it manages your DNS, name and network traffic. So this is your website running, which is running a web server, an application server, and database server, which has its own storage. So it's a data center, which is connected to S3 for data backup. So whatever backups are happening, that's going to your S3. So now if that's happening, and for some reason, something goes bad, you can really do this. So what you can do is, let's say something goes bad with your data center and it is down, you can immediately have, because you have a backup, you can have a replica of these. You can run web server and application server and DB server right from S3, because it already has the details of that data. And then using that, you can also create web server, application server, and database server, and then the traffic starts following to AWS, and that can work as your disaster recovery as well. Now, why it is important? Because most of the time in traditional environment, when you buy a disaster recovery, so you have this environment, and you need to create a replica of it and maintain it as a disaster recovery. and you don't use it until there are some issues with it, but you still pay for the whole thing. In that case, you can put it in cloud so that you won't be paying it until the time it is running. As soon as something goes bad, you can switch it on and it will start working because you have all the data available in S3. So it can act as disaster recovery as well, and it's really useful. All right, now how do we get data into cloud? So we know about how you work with AWS, but if you want to get data from on-premises to the cloud, these are some of the ways. So first one is internet, which is good if you have a small amount of data, which you can easily send over the internet. Depending upon your bandwidth, it will be transferring data. So it's more like an internet based on upload, download speed. Now, apart from that, if you don't want to use internet because it has its own capacity, depending on the vendor who is providing you the internet, you can use direct connect, which is a dedicated bandwidth between your site and AWS. It's more like a pipeline which you design between your AWS and customer, and then it will have a set bandwidth, and it won't be fluctuating, and you would be transferring data at the same bandwidth speed. So it will be faster that way. Now, even in that case, it's going to take some time, and that will be transferred, maybe taking some time. You can also go for something called import and export. What happens in that case? AWS sends you a media, you upload all the data there, they bring it back and they put it onto AWS. So yeah, depending upon the customer, you can choose one of these. Now, why should we opt for AWS storage? That's for a number of different reasons. So it reduces your cost, it reduces on-premises, you can reduce your on-premises load for storage. It changes the processes, so it's really dynamic and it can be achieved really fast in terms of logging mechanism. And it removes aging technology. So that's the advantage of cloud. So you bought one of the systems some 2 years back, and in 5 years it will go bad, or it will be older one. So you will be having new systems coming up, which will be much more efficient than what you're using. But when you're with AWS, you won't be realizing it because AWS always comes with new technologies and you can make use of it instantly without worrying about the pricing. Right. So that's in the nutshell, we have covered most of the theoretical aspect of your storage for everything. Now let's just see. So what we have.
So question.
Yeah, go on.
So based on your experience, which is the most popular storage, that is being used
S3.
with AWS? S3.
Yeah, so S3 is the one. So you always use S3. So S3 is the primary one, and like I said, and the reason for that is, and it also depends upon the usage. Okay. Now, when you are working with EC2 instances, your EBS definitely will be part of it. So EBS certainly comes with your EC2 instances. For example, you have created the EC2 instances now, you have an EBS attached to it. Now, but it is good for small storage. You want to do some installation, some installation or some updates, or you want to work with that operating system, you need EBS. Now, when you want huge data, or for example, you want to create a streaming website, a video website which runs for you, right? You want your people to come in, or maybe you're just creating something for your family or for your organization where you are storing their stuff. So all the weekly meetings or the monthly meetings, quarterly meetings, all those details, you can use S3 for those purposes. Right, how you use Google Drive for saving anything similar to that, you can use S3, but S3 is much cheaper than any of the other cloud vendors. So yeah, if you have such requirement, you want to save bigger files, you would be using S3. And best part is you can access it from web console, so you can access it from anywhere across the world. So once you have stored in S3, you always have access to this data, and you can always download it whatever you have saved, and you can make it private or public. So once it is private, it is accessible to you, and if you want someone else to provide access, you can make it public and you can give them access, so anywhere in the world people can download it. So it has those features. And then Glacier, it has its own features, which is more like archiving. So something which is very old and you're not using that data very frequently, you can use Glacier for that purposes. A storage gateway, you use it when you want a connection between on-premises and cloud. In such cases, the storage gateway comes into picture. So yeah, depending upon different use, but like I said, S3 is really important because most of the people, they are utilizing S3 for various other purposes. Like I said, Netflix is one of the companies that use case which you can use. They are actually running on S3. All right, so what we have, so within S3, there is one more service. I don't want to come to S3 instantly. Instead, I wanted to show you one more. So you have something called EFS, which was added recently later on. So it was not there before. So earlier we only had S3, Glacier, and Storage Gateway. Now later on, they created one more, which is called file system, because although your EBS was acting like a file system, but it was not an actual file system, and there was some limitations. So they created EBS, this one EBS, which is Elastic File System. It is more like a mount point which you create for your EC2 instances. So this is similar to your EBS, except that it is more efficient and it's more manageable. But it's elastic, you can attach and detach. So let's see that first, and then we'll go to other ones. So how do you do that? So what you do, so you remember that when we create EBS is something you can create only for one availability zones, while that's not the case with EFS. EFS, you can create it for any availability zone. So you can select all of them as well. So making it highly available within a region. So you select that, and you also select the VPC, which decides where you're creating. And then we go next, and you specify a key value pair. So it can be anything, you can name it. So let's say I will name it, okay, name is already there. So I'll name it EC2 EFS. So I'm creating something for EFS for EC2 instance. Now here I can see between general purpose and max IO, which we just discussed. So general purpose is more like a balanced approach where you have a good speed and good storage throughput. So you'll be choosing that. Max IO is more you're worried about read and write operations, more input output operation. In that case, you would be using max IO, but we are good with general purpose. And in this case, you can go for bursting or provision. So provision is again really fast performance, while bursting is only when it is required. So your system, when it is about to get to its highest level, maybe it's about to cross 90%, all of a sudden you'll be getting a burst performance. So yeah, that's been good. So it won't be hitting it all the time. And enable encryption is something which we can use, but as soon as we use it, we need to make use of key. So we need to order one of the KMS. We need to buy that from AWS. Now I have that, so I can use it. But if you don't want to use it, just ignore it, because you will be getting charged additional amount for key. KMS key is not free. Okay, let's go for next. And then we can see that it is good to be created. So it's easy, it's super easy, nothing much. And it's flexible, you can change your details later on as well. So I'm creating one, and then we will see that what are changes we can do. So right, so this is what we have created, EC2 EFS, and then it says it's available. Okay, it's still creating is what I can see at the bottom. So yeah, it is still creating across different regions. So we can just refresh it and see that it is created. Yeah, so it's gonna take some time. In the meantime, I can check for this one, which is already being available. Yeah, so this is being available, right? And I can check for its access. So I can design its access. So I can decide on security groups, or I can add additional security groups as well, or I can put it for one of the servers. So I can do that as well. Now, why it is efficient? Because it just creates all these mount points independently, right? So it is creating it independently, so that volume is created, and it's like EBS file system is created, and it is lying independently. Now, how do I mount it within AWS EC2? So if I want to do that, I can check it. So first thing is you will have to install this utility, which is Amazon EFS utils. Once that is done, you will be installing one more utility if you're working with Red Hat. So this is for Amazon EC2 Linux. You have to do that. And this is for Red Hat, and this is for your Ubuntu. So these are the commands depending upon which operating system you are working with. Now, if you have done Amazon, if you have used an Amazon Linux, then you use the first one. If you're using Red Hat, you'll be using the second one. And mounting is super easy the way we used to do. earlier in traditional way in our Unix or Linux instances. It's similar. So we'll be creating a directory first, EFS, let's say, and then you mount, say, EFS, you mount it to your file system, which you just created here. So that will be the name of file system which you created here. For example, here we have something as, okay, it's not moving. I'll bring it up again. So for example, your file system name is fsmt906d6. So this is your mount target ID. Okay, not this one. Yeah, this is the one. This is what you have in file system. So that will be the one. And you can use it to mount it. So, okay, this is for on-premises. It doesn't matter much, but yeah. So depending upon where you're doing it, you can do it. So once you do that, it's simple as mounting. So you will mount this to file system. You'll say EFS, which will be then mounted. And you can also include, if you want mount helper, you can use it with TLS mount. Otherwise, this is just fine. And then once that is done, you can also do it the way we were used to do it in etc slash, if you remember that, slash etc slash fs tab to make an entry there. You will be performing this mount. So mount it and then add an entry into slash etc slash fs tab. Once that is done, this file system will be available to your EC2 instances. And it is really dynamic. You can increase the size of this file system. You can create up to TBs of data as well. All right, so that's what we have created. So we have created for minimal, but that's how you create it. So that's another new addition to your Amazon storage. Okay, let's see what we have in S3. So S3 is our primary one, and that's going to take some time. So it will be like we will be taking the whole day for understanding S3 because it has quite a number of features within S3. But for now, I'll just give you a quick short sweet demo, which tells you how it works. So you can see that this is my S3 dashboard, right? So it says Amazon S3 right at the top. And then you have number of buckets. So these are nothing but buckets. You can see these logos here. So you can search for a bucket. If you don't remember, if you remember the name, you can do like that. So yeah, if I wanted software server, I can check for that. So let's say I was checking for one of the buckets. So I gave in search and says one bucket populated. It is for one region. Where do I see that? So this is the bucket name which I have given. And that's access. It says not public. That means it's private. And region, it is being created North Virginia region, and it was created at this particular date. So that's nothing but metadata. Or if I don't remember the name, then I'll have to choose. I'll have to scroll and find out which one I have. Now I can see that I have number of buckets created here, number of available buckets here, and then few are public, few are not. So which is not public, these are which are not public, they are private ones. And these are public, so that means anything inside this can be accessed by anyone who I will share the link with, so they can download that stuff. And we can see the region. So one of them in Oregon, others one in Virginia. So you can change your regions and you can create it across too. And this gives you a good look and feel. So it says total 8 buckets, 3 of them are public, while and they are scattered around 2 regions. Now, what do you have inside buckets? So let's go and look inside the bucket and see that what we really have. Like inside these buckets, you can see that I have files, I have RPMs, I have PM. So that's even my my key. So this is my key, which I can use later on to connect to one of my EC2 instances. So that's also I'm storing here, so that anywhere I go, if I have access to laptop or desktop, and I have access to internet, I can always connect to my AWS instances. So it can contain files, directories, zip files, music, your video files, your music files, any of that. So anything possible in this world, you can place it inside this directory. And once they are placed, they are called objects. So these are called objects. Now what object contains? So if I click on it, you will be getting a number of different details about the object. So it will have permissions, it will have properties, it will also have a link. Using this link, I can share it with anyone, or I can also download using this link. And then there are quite a number of properties, which we would be seeing it tomorrow, because that's a big topic, and S3 will be covering more in detail. It is one of the important services. Now, there are a few others which we don't have to cover. We have actually covered it. So EFS is the only one which we have covered today. Glacier is, we will be seeing it as a part of life cycle for S3. And storage gateway is something which we use with on-premises, so we don't have to use it, but this is more in terms of understanding when you work with an on-premises client. But S3 we will be learning in great detail because it has quite numerous features, and then it will take time to cover all of them. So we'll start it tomorrow, and if possible, we'll complete it tomorrow. If not, then we will extend it for another day. But yeah, this is something which we are going to discuss in detail, and we'll be discussing whatever features we have discussed over the slides for S3. We'll be covering all of them within S3. So hopefully we can finish it tomorrow. Once that is done, so we'll be done with storage, and then we'll be moving with RDS, which would be next topic. So yeah, but anyways, that's gonna take some time. So it's 24 today. Yeah, so most probably day after tomorrow we can start with RDS. We can not finish it. That's gonna take probably about 2 days. So once we are done with that, then we'll be moving to the rest of the other products. And networking certainly will take time, so that's we will give it time because we have quite a number of different things, and each of these topics will take 1 or 2 days in networking, especially in networking. But that is really important because we need to understand how this different system interfaces works. All right. So anyway, S3 will be the topic for tomorrow. And we have seen again, EBS is something we have covered as a part of the storage, and EFS is what we have covered. For S3 and Glacier, we'll be checking out tomorrow. All right, so apart from this, you got one issue which I can understand, which is being resolved for you now. Any other issues did you get?
No, not really. If I have any issues, I'll ping you.
All right, fine. So that's fine. That's good to know. And yeah, so whenever I'm online, I would be replying you. So no problem with that. And yes, so let's wrap it up then here till here, and then we will start with S3 tomorrow, and we'll see that it's really interesting, and it is one of the most useful service, and even not for organization point of view, but individually, if you want to work with something on your own, you can make use of S3 for that purpose. So yeah, we will see that tomorrow. All right, so let's catch up again tomorrow, and then we'll wrap it up for today. Sounds good?
Okay, all right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good one.